The Great Hall of the Velen Accord was built to make visitors feel small. Its ceiling rose so high that clouds sometimes formed inside. Statues of ancient alien leaders lined the walls, their stone eyes watching every creature that entered. Representatives from 100 different species sat in floating platforms. Arranged in a giant circle around the central speaking floor, Ambassador Kim Hannah stood alone on that floor. She was a small woman with gray hair and calm eyes. Behind her, a holographic image of Earth floated in the air, blue and green and beautiful. Around her, aliens of every shape and size looked down at her with expressions, ranging from boredom to amusement. She had been speaking for 10 minutes. She had shown them the message from the Nothrak Dominion. She had read aloud their demands. Surrender, integration, slavery, so Kim Hannah said. Her voice steady. The people of Earth have prepared our response. A ripple of interest moved through the assembly. The Nothrak delegation sat in the highest platform, looking down at her like predators watching prey. Their leader, High Commander Vorath, was a massive creature covered in dark scales. His 4 eyes glowed with a dull red light. He had conquered 40 star systems. He had destroyed entire civilizations. To him, Earth was just another meal. We have heard the Nothrak demands, Kim Hannah continued. We reject them completely. Vorath made a sound that might have been a laugh. Several other alien delegations joined him. The sound echoed through the great hall like thunder. Kim Hannah waited for silence. When it came, she spoke again. Furthermore, we deliver this formal warning to the Nothrak Dominion and to this council. She paused. Any attack on Earth or her colonies will be considered an act of war. Not a small war, not a limited conflict. Total war. We will hunt the Nothrak across every star system. We will destroy every ship, every station, every military base. We will not stop until the Nothrak Dominion no longer exists. The laughter this time was louder. Vorath stood up in his platform, his massive body blocking out the light behind him. Little human, he said, his voice deep and rough. Your species has been in space for 50 years. We have conquered for 5,000. Your entire fleet could fit inside one of our cargo bays. You speak of war? He spread his 4 arms wide. You do not know what war is. Kim Hannah looked up at him. She did not seem afraid. She did not seem angry. She simply looked at him the way a teacher might look at a student who had given the wrong answer. Hi, Commander, she said. I have delivered Earth's warning. What you do with it is your choice. But I ask you to remember this moment. Remember that we gave you a chance to walk away. Vorath's red eyes narrowed. Is that a threat? It is a fact, Kim Hannah said. Humanity does not make threats. We make promises. She turned and walked toward the exit. The alien delegates whispered to each other. Some were still laughing. Others looked uncertain. A few, those who had dealt with humans before, looked worried. One delegate, tall being with silver skin and 6 thin arms, called out to her. Ambassador Kim, surely you cannot believe your small fleet can defeat the Nothrak. They have 3,000 warships in this sector alone. Kim Hannah stopped at the door. She turned back and smiled. It was not a warm smile. You know exactly how many ships they have, she said. We have been counting, and she was gone. Far away, on the other side of the galaxy, Admiral Park Tahoe received her message. He was an old man with white hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles. He sat in the command center of the United Earth's fleet, surrounded by screens showing ship positions, supply lines, and battle plans. She delivered the warning, his aide reported, and their response. They laughed, sir. Admiral Park nodded slowly. He had expected nothing less. He pressed a button on his console. All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Park. Begin final preparations for Operation Sunfall. The enemy will move within 30 cycles. We will be ready. Across the solar system, hidden in asteroid belts and behind moons, hundreds of ships began to wake up. These were not the old visible ships that the aliens had counted. These were something new. Something humanity had been building in secret for 20 years. Captain Lee Sungmin stood on the bridge of his battleship, Eternal Soul. He was young for a captain, only 35 years old. But he had proven himself in the border skirmishes against pirates and smugglers. Now he would prove himself against something much worse. "Captain," his tactical officer said, "we have received the activation order." Lee Seung-min looked at his crew. They were young, most of them. They had never fought a real war. None of them had. Humanity had been lucky. They had entered space during a peaceful period. They had built their civilization without major conflict that was about to change. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "you all knew this day might come. The Northrok believe we are weak. They believe we are easy prey. They believe they can take our homes, enslave our families, and destroy everything we have built. They are wrong." His crew stood straighter. Fear was still in their eyes, but something else was growing there too. Something harder. In 30 cycles, the largest alien fleet ever assembled will enter our solar system. They expect to find a defenseless world. Instead, they will find us. Lee Seung-min smiled, "And we will teach them a lesson that the galaxy will never forget." In the great hall of the Velen Accord, Vorith was already planning his victory parade. He imagined human slaves building monuments to his glory. He imagined their planet stripped of resources, their people broken and obedient. He did not imagine what was actually waiting for him. He did not imagine the weapons that human engineers had been designing in secret laboratories. He did not imagine the tactics that human strategists had been developing for decades. He did not imagine the fury of a species that had spent its entire history fighting against impossible odds. Kim Hannah had told him to remember this moment. He had laughed at her words. He would not be laughing for long. The Nothrak fleet entered the Sol system like a dark cloud covering the sun. 3,000 warships moved in perfect formation, their hulls black against the stars. At their center, Vorith's flagship, the Crushing Fist, led the way. It was a massive vessel, larger than some moons. Covered with weapons that could turn planets to ash, Vorith stood on his command bridge, watching the small blue planet grow larger on his screens. Earth, home to 8 billion souls. Soon to be home to 8 billion slaves, Commander, his tactical officer reported. We have detected the human fleet. 200 ships in defensive formation around the third planet. Orath made a rumbling sound of amusement. 200. We have 3,000. He turned to his communications officer. Open a channel to the entire galaxy. I want everyone to witness this moment. Across 1,000 worlds, screens flickered to life. The Velen Accord Council watched from their great hall. Slave species watched from their chains. Free species watched from their homes. All of them saw the massive Nothrak fleet approaching the tiny human defensive line. People of Earth, Vorith broadcast, his voice reaching every ship and station in the system, your time is over. Surrender now, and I promise quick deaths for your leaders and useful lives for your workers. Resist, and I will make your suffering last for generations. For a long moment, there was silence. Then a human voice responded. It was calm, almost bored. Nothrak Fleet, this is Admiral Park Taeho of the United Earth Fleet. You have ignored our warning. You have entered our home. You have threatened our families. Pause. This is your last chance to leave. There will not be another. Wraith burst into laughter. His officers joined him. Across the galaxy, many alien viewers laughed too. What arrogance! What foolishness! 200 ships threatening 3,000. Human Admiral, Vorith said, still chuckling. You are either very brave or very stupid. Perhaps both. I will enjoy breaking you personally. You talk too much, Admiral Park replied. Operation Sunfall is go. Nothing happened for 3 seconds. Then the stars began to move. No, not the stars. Ships. Hundreds of them, peering from behind asteroids and moons, dropping their stealth fields, powering up weapons that glowed with terrible light. The 200 visible ships had been bait. The real fleet had been hiding, waiting, watching, Commander. The Nothrak tactical officer screamed. Detecting 500? No, 700 additional contacts. Unknown weapon signatures. They were hidden in the asteroid belt. Vorith's laughter died in his throat. Impossible. Our sensors were looking for the wrong things, Admiral Park's voice interrupted. Your species has been conquering with the same technology for 5,000 years. You never imagined someone might invent something new. The first wave of human weapons fired. They were called kinetic accelerators. Simple in concept. A metal rod, fired at 99% of the speed of light. No shields could stop them. No armor could survive them. When they hit, they released more energy than nuclear bombs. The front line of Nothrak's ships simply ceased to exist. Vorath stared at his screen in horror. As 300 of his ships vanished in the first 5 seconds, "Return fire!" All ships returned fire. The Nothrak weapons were powerful. Their plasma cannons could melt through steel. Their missiles could track targets across millions of kilometers. But they were designed to fight other Nothrak, other species who used similar technology. They were not designed to fight humans. Commander Yoon-Jina sat in the tactical center of the Eternal Soul, watching data streams flow across her screens. She was a thin woman with cold eyes and a brilliant mind. She had spent 10 years studying Nothrak tactics, learning their patterns, finding their weaknesses. "Their formation is breaking," she reported to Captain Lee Sung-min. "They are trying to spread out to reduce kinetic damage. Now is the time." Lee Sung-min nodded. "All ships launch antimatter torpedoes. Target their larger vessels." Across the human fleet, weapons bays opened. Torpedoes streaked toward the Nothrak ships, moving too fast to intercept, carrying payloads of pure annihilation. When matter met antimatter, the explosions were bright enough to see from Earth's surface. Chief Engineer Baek Dong-woo watched from his station deep inside the Eternal Soul. He was a round man with thick glasses and gentle hands. Those hands had designed the weapons that were now tearing the Nothrak fleet apart. He had worked on them for 15 years. He had hoped they would never be needed. "Energy readings are nominal," he reported. "The accelerators can fire 3 more volleys before requiring cooldown." "Make them count," Lee Sung-min ordered. On the crushing fist, Vorath was screaming orders that no one could follow. Half his fleet was gone. His communications were jammed. His shields were failing. For the first time in his long life, he felt something he had never felt before. "Fear, High Commander. We must retreat." His first officer shouted, "We cannot win this battle." "Retreat?" Vorath roared. "We are the Nothrak. We do not retreat. Then we die." The first officer screamed back, "Look at your screens. We are dying." Vorath looked. Ship after ship was vanishing from his display. The humans were not just winning, they were destroying his fleet completely. Their tactics were unlike anything he had ever seen. They attacked from multiple angles, coordinated perfectly, adapted instantly to every Nothrak response. "How?" he whispered. "How is this possible?" The answer came from Admiral Park, whose voice somehow cut through the jamming. "You asked how we could threaten you with 200 ships. You never asked what else we might have. You never asked what we might have invented. You never asked what we might be willing to do to protect our home. You dismissed our warning, High Commander. You laughed at us. Nobody is laughing now." The battle lasted 3 hours. When it ended, not a single Nothrak ship remained operational. Some had fled into deep space, damaged and dying. Most had been destroyed completely. The crushing fist, its engines dead, and its weapons silent. Drifted helplessly as human boarding parties cut through its hull, Vorath was found in his command chair, surrounded by the bodies of his officers. He had not tried to fight. He had not tried to run. He simply sat there, staring at nothing, unable to understand how everything had gone so wrong. They put chains on his wrists. The same kind of chains his species had used on billions of slaves. Then they dragged him to a shuttle and took him to Earth. Admiral Park Tae-ho broadcast one final message to the galaxy. His face appeared on screens across 1,000 worlds. He looked tired. He looked sad. But his voice was iron. "We warned you," he said. "You did not listen. Now, humanity comes for the Nothrak. Stay out of our way." The transmission ended. Across the galaxy, 1 billion voices fell silent. The laughter had stopped. In its place was something new. Fear, humanity had announced itself, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Great Hall of the Velen Accord had never been so quiet. Representatives who had laughed at Ambassador Kim Hanna now sat in stunned silence. The screens around them still showed images of the battle. Nothrak ships exploding. Human weapons firing. 3,000 of the galaxy's most feared warships. Destroyed in 3 hours, Ambassador Kim Hanna stood on the central speaking floor once again. This time no one was laughing. "I told you to remember that moment," she said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "The moment when you dismissed our warning, the moment when High Commander Voreth called us weak and helpless." Shh, she paused. "Where is High Commander Voreth now?" No one answered. They all knew. Voreth was in chains on Earth, waiting for his trial. "Humanity did not want this war," Kim Hanna continued. "We came to the stars seeking knowledge, seeking friendship, seeking peace. We found instead a galaxy where the strong prey upon the weak, where species like the Nothrok enslave billions while others watch and do nothing." The silver-skinned delegate who had questioned her before spoke up. His voice was shaking. "Ambassador Kim, surely you understand our position. The Nothrak were too powerful. Opposing them would have meant our destruction." "I understand perfectly," Kim Hanna said. "You were afraid. We were not." She pressed a button on her console. Holographic images appeared in the air above her. Images of Nothrak slave camps. Images of workers dying in mines. Images of children torn from their parents. Images of entire species worked to extinction. "These are the crimes of the Nothrok Dominion," she said. 40 star systems. Billions of slaves. Centuries of suffering. And the Velen Accord did nothing. She looked around the Great Hall. "You had the power to stop this? Together, your fleets outnumber the Nethrak 10-1. But you were afraid. What would you have us do now?" Another delegate asked. "Support your war. Send our ships to die alongside yours?" Kim Hanna smiled. It was not a kind smile. "We are not asking for your help," she said. "We are warning you to stay out of our way. Humanity will handle the Nothrak. What happens after that depends on the choices you make today." She turned and walked out of the Great Hall. Behind her, chaos erupted as delegates screamed at each other. On Earth, the High Council met in emergency session. The council chamber was deep underground, protected by meters of steel and stone. Around the table sat the leaders of humanity, military commanders, scientists, politicians, all of them watching Admiral Park Teho deliver his report. "We won the battle," the Admiral said. "But the war is just beginning. The Nothrak Dominion still controls 40 star systems. They still have thousands of ships scattered across their territory. They will rebuild. They will return, unless we stop them." Premier No De-yong, the leader of the United Earth government, leaned forward. He was an old man with tired eyes and heavy shoulders. "What are you proposing, Admiral?" "Total war," Park Teho said. "We take the fight to them. We attack their shipyards. We free their slaves. We dismantle their entire empire, piece by piece." General Cho Young-ho nodded in agreement. He was a large man with scars on his face and fire in his eyes. "My ground forces are ready. Give us transports, and we will liberate every slave world in the Dominion." But Dr. Shin Yun-bai raised her hand. She was a small woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice. She led Earth's Weapons Research Division. She had created the kinetic accelerators and the antimatter torpedoes. "I must speak against this," she said. "Yes, we won today. But at what cost? 40% of our fleet is gone. Thousands of our people are dead. If we continue this war, how many more will die? If we stop now, how many will die when the Nothrok return?" General Cho countered. "They will not forgive this defeat. They will come back stronger, angrier, more determined. Better to end them now, while we have the advantage." Dr. Shin shook her head. "Listen to yourself. End them. You were talking about genocide. I'm talking about survival," General Cho said. The Nothrak have shown what they do to species they conquer: slavery, torture, death. If we give them a chance to recover, that will be our future. Admiral Park Tae-ho held up his hand for silence. Dr. Shin raises important concerns. We must not become monsters in our fight against monsters. But General Cho is also right. The Nothrak will never stop on their own. They have been conquering for 5,000 years. It is all they know. Premier No closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. What about the other species? The slaves. The Velen Accord. Commander Yoon Jina spoke for the first time. She had been sitting silently in the corner, watching everyone with her cold, calculating eyes. I have analyzed the intelligence from Vorith's flagship, she said. The Nothrak Dominion is not as strong as it appears. Many of their conquered species are ready to rebel. They lack only the weapons and the opportunity. She paused. If we attack the Dominion, we will not be fighting alone. We will be fighting alongside every slave who dreams of freedom. The room fell silent as her words sank in. Far across the galaxy, on a dozen different worlds, slaves looked up at the stars. They had heard the news. They had seen the images. A young species, barely 50 years in space, had destroyed the mighty Nothrak fleet. The masters were not invincible. The chains could be broken. On a mining world called Dust, a worker named Gray handed a broken piece of metal to his neighbor. It could be sharpened into a blade. It could become a weapon. They had been collecting such pieces for years, hiding them in secret places, waiting for a moment that might never come. Now it was coming. Back on Earth, Premier No Dae-jun stood up. His decision was made. We will not commit genocide, he said. We are not the Nothrak, but we will not hide behind our defenses and wait for them to attack again. He looked around the table at his commanders, his scientists, his people. We will go to war. We will free the slaves. We will destroy the Nothrak military completely. And when it is over, we will build something better. He turned to Admiral Park. Begin preparations for the largest fleet operation in human high. Story, we have a galaxy to liberate. Admiral Park stood and saluted. General Cho smiled grimly. Dr. Shin closed her eyes, accepting a future she had hoped to prevent. Commander Yoon began calculating logistics. Humanity was going to war. Not for conquest. Not for revenge. For something greater, for freedom. The human fleet jumped from star to star like wolves hunting through a forest. Admiral Park Tae-ho had divided his forces into 12 battle groups, each one assigned to a different sector of the Nothrak Dominion. They did not attack planets. They attacked shipyards, supply stations, communication centers. They cut the Dominion into pieces and watched those pieces die, Captain Lee. Soonmin led Battle Group 7 into the Velok system, home to the largest Nothrak shipyard outside their homeworld. His fleet had grown since the first battle. New ships joined every week, built in Earth's factories and crewed by volunteers who had seen what the Nothrak did to the species they conquered. Captain. The shipyard is defended by 200 Nothrak vessels. Commander Yoon Jina reported from her station. They have positioned themselves around the construction platforms. Lee Seungmin studied the tactical display. The Nothrak were learning. They no longer gathered in tight formations that made easy targets for kinetic weapons. They spread out, using the shipyard itself as cover. They think the shipyard will protect them, he said. They think we will not risk damaging it. Will we? Yoon Jina asked. Lee Seungmin remembered the images from the slave worlds. The workers who died in those ships, the families who never saw each other again, the children born into chains. Destroy it all, he said. The battle was fierce but short. The Nothrak fought hard, knowing they could not retreat, knowing their failure would mean the death of their empire's ability to rebuild. But human weapons were too fast, too powerful, too terrible to stop. When it was over, the Velok shipyard was a cloud of debris spreading slowly through space. 100 Nothrak ships had been destroyed. 20 human ships were gone. Lee Seungmin felt the weight of those 20 ships on his heart. Each one held hundreds of souls who would never go home. Send our position to the nearest slave world, he ordered. Tell them the chains are breaking. Tell them to rise. On the surface of a planet called Iron, Sergeant Moon Sora led her squad through the ruins of a Nothrock command center. She was a young woman with short hair and hard eyes. She had volunteered for ground forces because she wanted to look the enemy in the face. She wanted to see their fear. Instead, she found something worse. "Sergeant," one of her soldiers called. "You need to see this." They had found the holding cells. Hundreds of them, stacked in rows like storage containers. Inside each one were beings of a dozen different species, packed so tightly they could barely move. Many were dead. The living stared at the human soldiers with eyes that had forgotten what hope looked like. Moon. Sora's hands shook as she activated the release mechanisms. The doors opened. The prisoners stumbled out, blinking in the light, unable to believe what was happening. "You are free," she said. Her voice cracked. "You are all free." An old creature with gray skin and 4 arms fell to its knees before her. It spoke in a language she did not understand, but the translator in her ear converted the words. "We prayed for this day," it said. "We prayed for someone to come. We never believed anyone would." Moon Sora helped it stand. "We came," she said, "and we are not leaving until every last chain is broken." She activated her communicator and broadcast what they had found. The images spread across the galaxy. The Velen Accord could no longer pretend they did not know. The Nothrak could no longer hide their crimes. Public opinion shifted like a great wave, sweeping away the last doubts about humanity's war. But the war took its toll. Lieutenant Kongwu Jin had been the best pilot in the fleet. He had destroyed more Nothrak ships than anyone else. His face appeared on recruitment posters across Earth. He was a hero. A symbol. He died on the 47th day of the campaign. His fighter was hit by debris during a battle near a Nothrak supply station. The damage was not immediately fatal. He managed to crash land on a nearby moon. But the Nothrak found him before rescue could arrive. They made an example of him, Admiral. Teho received the news in his command center. He listened to the report in silence. Then he stood and walked to the observation window. Outside, stars burned against the endless darkness. Lieutenant Kong knew the risks, he said quietly. He chose to fight anyway. He chose to give his life for something greater than himself. 8. He turned to face his officers. "We will honor his sacrifice by finishing what he started. Double our attacks in his sector. The Nothrak will learn the cost of their cruelty." On Earth, Dr. Shinyun Bai worked in her laboratory, developing new weapons. She had not slept in 3 days. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the images from the slave worlds. She saw the bodies of human soldiers killed in battle. She saw the faces of the enemies she was helping to destroy. "I never wanted this," she whispered to herself. "I built these weapons to protect us, not to conquer." Ow! Chief Engineer Beek Dongwu found her crying at her workstation. He sat down beside her and said nothing for a long time. "I know how you feel," he finally said. "I helped design the kinetic accelerators. Every time they fire, I see the ships exploding. I see the lives ending." He paused. "But then I remember the slave camps. I remember the children in chains. And I know that our weapons are ending something worse." Dr. Shin wiped her eyes. "When does it stop, Dongwu? When do we stop?" "When there are no more chains to break," he said. "When every slave is free. When no one has to be afraid anymore." In a cell on Earth, Vorath sat in darkness. They had not tortured him. They had not starved him. They simply left him alone with his thoughts. Admiral Park came to visit him once. The old human sat on the other side of the energy barrier, looking at the creature who had threatened to enslave his entire species. "I do not understand," Vorath said. His voice was hollow, broken. "We have conquered for 5,000 years. No species has ever fought back like this. No one has ever defeated us so completely." He looked at Park with his 4 red eyes. "What are you?" Admiral Park considered the question for a long moment. "We are human," he said. "We are a species that has spent its entire history fighting against impossible odds. We have survived ice ages. We have survived plagues. We have survived wars that nearly destroyed us. Every time the universe tried to kill us, we refused to die." He leaned forward, his old eyes burning with cold fire. "You made the same mistake that every enemy has made throughout our history. You underestimated us. You assumed that because we were young, we were weak. You assumed that because we were small, we were easy prey." He stood and turned to leave. Humanity does not forgive. Humanity does not forget. And humanity does not stop. You are learning that now. The rest of the galaxy is watching and learning too. He walked away, leaving Varath alone in the darkness. The war continued. The chains kept breaking, and across the stars, the Nithrak Dominion began to crumble. 1 year after the Nithrak fleet entered the Sol system, humanity's fleet surrounded the Nithrak homeworld. 10,000 ships formed a ring of steel and fire around the planet where 5,000 years of conquest had begun. On the surface, billions of Nothrak looked up at the sky and saw their doom. Admiral Park Teho stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the Unbroken Spirit. Around him, his officers worked in focused silence. They had fought across 40 star systems. They had freed billions of slaves. They had lost thousands of friends. Now, finally, they had reached the end. "Admiral," his communications officer reported, "the Nothrak leadership is requesting terms for surrender." Park nodded slowly. "Open a channel." The face of the new Nothrak High Commander appeared on screen. He was younger than Vorath, his scales a lighter shade of gray. His 4 eyes held none of the arrogance that Vorath had shown. They held only fear. "Admiral Park," the Nothrak said, "the Dominion surrenders unconditionally. We accept any terms you demand. We ask only that you spare our civilians, our children." Park studied the face of his enemy. This being had not started the war. He had inherited it. He had watched his empire crumble, his fleets burn, his power vanish. Now he was begging for mercy from a species his people had planned to enslave. "Your request is received," Park said. "Stand by for our response." He closed the channel and turned to face the holographic image of the Earth's High Council. Premier No Dae-jung, Ambassador Kim Hanna, Dr. Shin Yunbai, General Cho Yongho, and others looked back at him from across the stars. "The Nothrak have surrendered," Park reported. "The decision is yours." General Cho spoke first. "Orbital bombardment. Turn their cities to glass. They W. Ould have done the same to us." Dr. Shin shook her head violently. "No, we cannot. We must not. If we destroy them, we become exactly what we fought against." "They enslaved billions," General Cho argued. "They tortured and killed without mercy for 5,000 years. Justice demands payment." "Justice, yes," Dr. Shin replied. "Genocide, no. There is a difference." Ambassador Kim Hanna raised her hand for silence. "I have spoken with representatives of the liberated species. They want revenge. They want blood. But they also want to be free of the cycle of violence. They want to build something new." Premier No Dae-jung listened to all of them. Then he turned to Admiral Park. "Admiral, you have fought this war from the beginning. You have seen more death than anyone else in this room. What do you recommend?" Park was silent for a long moment. He thought about Lieutenant Kang, who had died alone on that frozen moon. He thought about Captain Lee Sungmin, who had aged 10 years and 12 months of constant battle. He thought about Sergeant Moon Sora, who still woke up screaming from nightmares about the slave camps. "I want to burn them," he admitted. His voice was rough, tired. "I want to make them suffer for every life they took, every chain they forged, every hope they destroyed." He paused. "But that is not who we are. That is not who we should be." He looked directly at the council. "We warned them. They did not listen. We defeated them. Now we have a choice. We can be conquerors, like they were. Or we can be something better." Took a deep breath. "I recommend we accept their surrender. Dismantle their military. Try their war criminals. But spare their people. Let them live knowing that humanity showed them the mercy they never showed others." Council voted. It was not unanimous. General Cho voted for destruction. 2 other military commanders voted with him, but the majority voted for mercy. Premier No Daejung delivered the verdict himself. The Nathrak Dominion is dissolved, he announced. All military forces will be surrendered and destroyed. All leaders responsible for war crimes will face trial. All slaves will be freed and compensated from Nathrak resources. He paused, but the Nothrak species will be spared. They will be allowed to live on their homeworld, to rebuild their civilization, to find a new path. On the Nothrak homeworld, millions watched the broadcast in stunned silence. They had expected death. They had received life. Many wept. Some could not understand. A few began to hope. Ambassador Kim Hannah traveled to the surface to oversee the surrender. She walked through streets where Nothrak civilians stared at her with a mixture of fear and wonder. Children hid behind their parents. Elders bowed their heads. One young Nothrak approached her. It was barely more than a child, its scales still soft, its eyes still bright. "Why?" it asked. "Why did you not destroy us? We would have destroyed you." Kim Hannah knelt down to look at the child directly. "'Cause we wanted to show you that there is another way," she said. "Your ancestors chose conquest. Your parents chose slavery. You can choose differently. The future is not written yet." The child stared at her for a long moment. Then it turned and ran back to its family. Kim Hannah watched it go. Maybe that child would grow up to be a monster, like its ancestors. Or maybe it would remember this moment. Maybe it would become something new. Across the galaxy, the liberated species began to rebuild. Some wanted to form new alliances with humanity. Others wanted to be left alone. All of them remembered what had happened. All of them knew that the galaxy had changed forever. At the final session of the Velen Accord, Ambassador Kim Hannah delivered humanity's message. The Great Hall was packed. Every species, great and small, had sent representatives. They hung on her every word. "We came to the stars seeking peace," she said. "We found war. We did not choose this, but we finished it." She looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of dozens of alien species. Let every species here remember what happened. Earth extended a warning before the first shot was fired. The Nothrak ignored it. "We will extend that same courtesy to anyone who threatens humanity or our allies." Her voice hardened. "Ignore it at your peril." The silence that followed was absolute. 6 months later, Admiral Park Tae-ho retired. He was tired. He was old. He had seen enough death for 10 lifetimes. He built a small house on a hill overlooking the sea and spent his days watching the waves. Captain Lee Sungman was promoted to admiral. He took command of the fleet and vowed to be worthy of the responsibility. He visited the memorial wall where the names of every fallen soldier were carved in stone. He ran his fingers over the letters and made silent promises. Dr. Shin Yunbai shut down her weapons laboratory. She turned her genius toward medicine, toward healing, toward building instead of destroying. She never forgot what she had created. She never stopped trying to balance the scales. Sergeant Moon Sora returned to the planet called Iron, where she had first seen the slave camps. The camps were gone now, replaced by homes and schools and gardens. She met the old creature she had freed on that first day. It embraced her with its 4 arms and wept. "You changed everything," it said. "You gave us back our future." Moon Sora hugged it back. For the first time since the war began, she smiled. And on a small blue planet in an unremarkable star system, 8 billion humans continued their lives. They went to work. They raised their children. They laughed and cried and dreamed. Most of them had never left Earth. Most of them never would. But all of them knew what their species had done. All of them knew what humanity was capable of. All of them carried within them the same fire that had burned the Nothrak Dominion to ash. The galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. Humanity had arrived. And humanity was just getting started.